Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Second Street Marvel. I hope you're all having a very good morning this morning, and welcome back to the morning movie chat. Now, if this is your first time here, typically what I do is I talk a lot here on these morning movie chats about movies, just out there, just flapping my gums about, the one thing that I absolutely love the most, and that's movies, right? And who doesn't love movies? I think all of us do. Chances are, if you're on my channel, you love movies probably just about as much as I do, if not maybe more, and that's perfectly okay. Um, I was a child of the 80s, I guess you could say. I was born in the late 70s and pretty much grew up in the 80s. Most of my teen years were spent in the 90s. And, during those times, they were definitely different times in our society. I would say it was a much better time in the movie industry. And, now, before I really get into anything, I just want to let you all know if you could please do me a favor, whether you are a returning viewer or this is your first time here. Could you please make sure that you're subscribed, and click that little bell so you get notifications anytime I've uploaded new content. What that also does is it sends you out notifications anytime I plan on doing a live video. I do these live videos here talking about movies typically for about an hour long every single day throughout the work week. I also here on Mondays I normally do my like the trailer park news where I get on and be a little bit silly, flop my gums, just about some of like the clickbaity news out there, and also just showing comic previews. Wednesdays I do my comic book pull list, and on Fridays I do the trailer park live. And the trailer park live, in case you haven't been there before, is where I typically go through some of the different comic books that I pulled for the week, and then I get in and interact with you all, the viewers, as I talk about some of the topics that have kind of happened throughout the week. It's a really good time. Now, this past Friday was a little bit different. Excuse me. Was a little bit different, as I it was kind of a slow week of news, while at the same time there was so much. But the one thing I was really noticing was I don't really talk much about comic books. I'm like, that's the main point of my channel, is to talk about comic books, and as well as movies and music as well. And I just felt like sharing a little bit more of my love for comics on Friday, so that's what I went ahead and did. And today, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about a little more. Now, also, before I move on, I want to let you guys know, in case you don't already know, you can become a member of our Patreon supporter here of the channel. Now, there is a link down in the description. In the description, where you can go and become a monthly Patreon member. Where there's, if you go there, you can find my Patreon, and there's a little video there where I talk about, kind of what my plans are for the future and everything of this channel and things like that. And you Patreon supporters, I greatly value input from you guys for supporting me and the channel in that way. So please, if you are a Patreon supporter, make sure that you get in there, leave some suggestions, leave some comments, anything that I could do to hopefully help bring a better show for you all. Because this is ultimately who I do it for, is you guys, the viewers here who come to my channel. I mean, if this was so much about me, believe me, I would be talking about a whole bunch of different things and sharing a lot more of my up close and personal feelings. But this is here for you guys, so we can talk about movies, comic books, and even music at times. Just some of the things that I definitely love out there in the world, of entertainment. Pert Minded, welcome to the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. And also, down in the description, if you don't want to become a monthly Patreon supporter, you can always just go down there. There's a link at the very top of the description where you can go to and make direct donations to me through via Streamlabs. And for any of you guys who do that, I do thank you all very, very much for all of your support. I do greatly appreciate it. And believe me, like I said, if you're a Patreon supporter, or even if you're just sending in donations through Streamlabs, please leave some comments. Let me know what you think about my content and what you think I could do to improve. I greatly value your guys' input on that. Now, today what I want to talk about is going to be talking about movies, but today we're going to be talking about the X-Men and the MCU. Now, as we all know here, not too long ago, I believe it was back in, was it February or March, when it finally got finalized that we all know now that Disney had acquired the rights to all the Fox properties. And now, while this, some people may look at this as, maybe a bad thing. It's not really that bad of a thing. A lot of people have been talking lately about, Disney having a monopoly and all of these kinds of things. And while that is somewhat true, I also still kind of believe that this monopoly everybody thinks it has. They've really only got IP, really. You know what I mean? These intellectual properties. They've got these franchises that they own. They don't have an edge on the market. They've got an edge on Marvel superheroes. That's really about it. Um, and so, that's really neither here nor there. But a while back, I did a video back in February, and I was talking about this the other day. I did a video called "The X-Men in the MCU," and how I kind of think that the X-Men are going to be brought into the MCU. And actually, I went back and watched that video recently, and I was actually watching it. And I'm like, I still think that I stand behind my predictions 100%. And I'm not sure if you guys got a chance to watch that video. I actually set up a couple of scenarios, different scenarios that I think would possibly happen with bringing them into the MCU. And one of those theories was, depending on what direction they took, I basically laid down two different scenarios. One of them was they take over all of these Fox properties and they end up using not necessarily the movies for their canon, but using a lot of the production team and things like that have been there making these X-Men movies in the past, because they have people there who have been working for the studio who not only just know these characters but have kind of been working with a lot of that, and they're a little familiar with that territory. And we now know that that's not what they plan to do at all. Disney took over and pretty much scrapped everything Fox. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I actually kind of figured that at the time, and that's where I set up my second scenario, in which I believe that the X-Men will be coming into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that pretty much had to deal with Kevin Feige taking and bringing those characters and finding a way to integrate them in. Now, the tricky thing is integrating the X-Men into the MCU. As we know, we've already got, got what, an 11, 12 year long history now of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we're just now going to get the X-Men, which brings about a lot of challenges with it in how exactly they're going to go through and bring these characters in. Obviously they're going to have to introduce them as new characters, and they're going to be basically new properties. And as we all know, the X-Men actually started a long time ago. Now, there's been many theories out there about how exactly they're going to do the X-Men in the MCU now, because obviously age would be a factor if they decided to keep using Professor Xavier and Magneto as basically coming out of the Holocaust and things like that. So obviously, they're going to have to do something a little bit different to bring these characters in. For a long time, there's been, and I see many people out there still talking about the X-Men, and how would you say, like, political allegories, I guess you could say, to our real lives. Now, I've seen other content creators, even recently, even some of the ones that I really like and respect, go off and say, that the X-Men were an allegory for Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, which is absolutely simply not the truth. It's just absolutely not true. There has been multiple interviews with Stan Lee where he has actually even come out and said that Professor Xavier and Magneto are not these allegories to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. And now, while at the time, I believe he even said it just happened to be convenient that all of that happened, but they did, still at the times put things, like, how would you say, like, political allegories in their books without it being so on the nose, because that was the whole thing he wanted to do. While yes, there is a lot of things that mirror our reality, he didn't want to beat the readers over the head with politics, and that's something that we've seen far too much in a lot of films these days. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have no problem with people putting their political beliefs or things that they believe in these movies. There's absolutely no problem with that. The issue is when you have to do it so on the nose, or when it's something that doesn't necessarily fit the narrative of the story. Now, while a lot of the things that go on in our real world and politics do somewhat fit the narrative of a lot of these stories, there's a difference between making it something entertainment and something that's just directly not even an allegory to what's going on in our real lives, but it's just like a direct reflection of that. Case in point, we see that the movie The Last Jedi, which was, if you ask me, I don't hate the film. I think it's an okay movie, but it's not the best movie out there in the world. But there's one thing that absolutely nobody can deny is that that movie was divisive amongst fans, amongst pretty much amongst everybody. It's been a very divisive film. And we've heard a lot of people come out and talk about, the things like there's just too much politics, like this isn't Star Wars, and just all of these different things. Now, movie, the thing is, and while in the past it's never been like that, like, sure, there are allegories, there's parallels to our reality, there's, I mean, obviously there is that in those kind of movies. But when we get to The Last Jedi, it was just so on the nose. It was just so obvious that it's upsetting for a lot of people. Now, there are some things that people out there go out there and say, which I think are ridiculous too, where people are talking about like, oh, these movies are supposed to be escapism and all of this stuff. Okay, to me that's just an excuse. One of the excuses for being upset about these kinds of things being in the movie. Although I am not saying that anybody that feels that way is absolutely wrong, because these movies are supposed to be some of an escapism. You should be able to go to the theater or go to a movie and be entertained when you're watching a movie like Star Wars. If you're making a movie that is not even that has the politics, even our real world politics or anything like that in it, that's perfectly fine. There are movies that are predicated basically upon that, upon actually presenting political aspects, political views, and things like that. Like, I'm not sure if you ever seen the movie Spotlight. The movie Spotlight was a really great movie. It was took place. And I can't remember what news publication it was, but it took place back in the early 2000s, where they were building this case, writing these stories about the Catholic priests and the abuse that they were doing of children and everything like that. 9/11 happened while they were writing all this story. They were getting ready to break this story. 9/11 happened, and it kind of, they didn't feel it was the right time, so they eventually, after that, started to leak those stories out there in the newspaper, and it became a pretty big thing. And I lived through that. I was an adult through all that. It's stuff I definitely remember. Now the thing is, that movie, while it has a lot of things in it, and it's based on our real life, that movie was directly made to it wasn't made for an escapism from those kinds of things from our real lives. That movie was made specifically for that reason. And that's why I say I think there's a definite difference in the type of movie that you're doing, where that would be a little more allowable, whereas, if I'm watching a story about Star Wars, a movie about Star Wars, I don't need to see political allegories to say the situation that we have going on at our nation's borders or anything like that, or just those kinds of things. That's not what Star Wars is about. Star Wars, while I say it does have political ties and there are definitely political allegories, it's never been so on the nose as they did in The Last Jedi. And I think that's really where they lost a lot of people. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that, because we can see, you can go back through and watch any of the Star Wars movies and see where there's political allegories to it, to our real lives. But it's just nothing that's so on the nose where you're just sitting there like, okay, well, I just feel like I'm watching CNN here, while I'm watching this movie. And I think that's the big difference. And I think that's something that a lot of people, while we may want something to be true, that doesn't necessarily make it so. And that's where I'm talking about, like, the X-Men coming into the MCU, and people talking about the X-Men being an allegory for Professor Professor Hicks, for Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, is simply not true. Stan Lee himself has actually even come out and said that. Mads Mama Bear, welcome to the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. So again, while I have no problems with people doing that in movies, because some movies are made for exactly that. I don't even really necessarily take issue with it. I just don't like it as much when I see it in a film that's not supposed to necessarily be that. And we can already see that. I'm sure at some point that's they're going to change that for the MCU and the X-Men come in. They're probably going to make some sort of allegories about that. And again, I hope that I am wrong here. I hope I'm absolutely wrong. But we have seen, just through time, just how the MCU has kind of evolved and what's gone on. Now, I will say that I do trust in Kevin Feige. He hasn't really let us down yet. In any of these kind of senses where something's just so on the nose where it's going to be upsetting people. Now, they have obviously had things that have happened off screen with some of their stars and just some of the movies and things like that, that they are a little more controversial as far as the politics, as far as the fans and viewers out there with these things. Now, that all being said, like I said, that Stanley himself has said that the X-Men are not are not supposed to be those allegories for Malcolm X and Professor Xavier. They are just stories, and they simply put some of that into the books, some of those stories and messages and some of their thoughts into the books, but they did it in a way without beating people over the head. Now, I do have a feeling that Kevin Feige is going to do that exact same thing, because when it comes to like the X-Men, it is in itself like that political allegory that you don't have to beat anybody over the head with it. You know, really the whole story of the X-Men and everything throughout the comic books has to do with discrimination. And discrimination, you know, and I've talked about this before on a lot of my live streams, is discrimination happens to absolutely everybody. And that's one thing that a lot of people seem to misunderstand. You know, a lot of people are going out there, you know, these days, you know, they'll talk about these race issues, these uh, not only race issues but issues of identity, you know, with the identity politics and all of that stuff. Just going out there and, you know, just brushing everything with these big broad strokes. And now, like I said, everybody's been subject to discrimination. I don't care who you are, black, white, red, brown. It doesn't matter. We've all been subject to it. So, you know, it's something we all relate to. You know, it doesn't matter who's telling the story, whether it's a white guy, a black guy, a Chinese guy, anything like that, Middle Eastern. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Um, Everybody's been subject to discrimination, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people fail to realize these days. And it's something that you know, I think a lot more people need to really take a step back and look at. And that's where I'm hoping, you know, once we get these X-Men into the MCU, we won't have to be beat over the head with all of these not even political agenda, but all these political allegories. Okay, like the story in itself is already political, not even just a political allegory, just an allegory to being discriminated against. And as I said, we've all been discriminated against in our lives. I can guarantee you that. I can absolutely guarantee you that. I know growing up as a kid, I grew up in the Midwest in Kansas. I had my mother is half Mexican. My father is Native American. Danish. There's German. There's you know, just plenty of other things in my background. You know, I'm sure, you know, I always call myself the ultimate mutt. I've got, you know, probably more than I realize throughout my bloodline. And the thing is, you know, growing up, you know, I went through that same discrimination. I still go through it today. You know, people still see me online, see pictures of me and whatnot, and, you know, pretty much say, oh, dude, that's a white dude. You know, and, you know, some people, you know, some people are, you know, a little more intelligent than that, and you know, they can look at people and be like, oh, this person's obviously of a mixed race and origin, and things like that. And, you know, again, these are things I myself have never really cared about. I don't care what nationality you are, what color your skin is, or anything like that. And I think for the most part, most of the people I know, especially as adults, maybe when we were kids, you know, people were just stupid, and, you know, we're stupid kids. Most adults don't really care about this stuff. You go out in the real world, people aren't out there exactly all, you know, like under that same microscope of that convoluted microscope that we see, you know, when we get on social media, be it Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything like that. So again, all that aside, okay, we're talking about the X-Men here. Well, like I said, it is somewhat of an allegory to that. You know, how exactly are they going to be integrating all of that into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And like I said, I did that video a while back, and I think I was still pretty right on. The one thing that I didn't know back there in February was all the things going into Disney Plus, and exactly what all that was going to entail. Um, Now we know, you know, that Disney Plus is going to be used to start these streaming shows where they're going to be introducing new characters in the MCU, and they're also going to be, you know, putting TV shows on there of characters that we've already got that are going to segue back into the MCU. I am quite sure, building these stories and probably building some of these other bigger event types for the films in the MCU. And, you know, key example is, you know, we got Falcon and Winter Soldier coming, we've got Hawkeye coming, we've got WandaVision coming. All these characters who have been in the MCU and are going to these streaming shows where they're going to be doing their thing, you know, building whatever story they are, probably introducing characters, and then going back out into the MCU movies. There's been a lot of speculation about exactly what's going to be going on with these movies. Now, in the past, when I was talking about the X-Men coming in, I kind of figured, at like I said at the time, we didn't know that they were going to be doing this, and now I still stand behind a lot of what I was talking about with the integration of the X-Men and the mutants into the MCU. And for one, I believe their best bet is a lot of people. I know we all want Wolverine. Wolverine was one of the more popular characters, and not in just Marvel Comics, but or of the X-Men, but in Marvel Comics. Altogether, he's just a very popular character. Now, but I also at the same time think that's partially in fact due to back in the late 90s, was it 2000 when the X-Men movie finally came out. Obviously Hugh Jackman came in and did a really great job playing Wolverine, and they really went Wolverine centric throughout the whole Fox universe. They centered more on the character of Wolverine than they did really any of the other characters. And I'm talking even Xavier and Magneto himself, okay, themselves. They didn't really even focus on them so much, and it's supposed to be the X-Men, this team of mutants that were being led by Charles Xavier. And so I think that's something that's really big, coming into and integrating them into the MCU. While Wolverine probably makes sense to have him be the first one introduced because, as we all know, like he's pretty much he ages really slow, and he's been around for a long time. And that's something they definitely touched upon in the X-Men movies. Was they said he could be older than Charles Xavier, and he very very well could be. I still don't think that they're going to do Wolverine first. And honestly, if you ask me, it would probably be smartest of them not to. Why, instead of coming in with a bang with, a character like a Wolverine, I would save him for last. I'd save him for one of the last characters, and not the last character of the mutants to introduce. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. What I was talking about in my video before was how they integrate in these X-Men into the MCU. And I think one of the first and easiest and probably best ways to do it is to introduce a couple of characters first. Now that we know that these streaming shows are coming out, I honestly believe even more so that's exactly what we're going to get. Is we will get some of these mutants introduced into the MCU, probably by way of these TV shows that are going to be coming into the Disney streaming service. But my prediction is that they're going to introduce us to a couple of characters, then a couple more, and then a couple of more. Because if you follow the X-Men, if you ever read really any other comic books, or hell, you don't even have to read the comic books. You could actually be a full-on normie and just watch the movies. You'd realize and you'd know, just through that. All you got to do is watch the first two X-Men movies to really know that when it comes to like being either one of the X-Men or part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Did they ever change that to just Brotherhood of Mutants? I thought it was Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I could totally be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure it's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Either way, the point being is that when you're on one of these teams, there's a definite reason why. Okay, all of these characters, whether they're on the good guys or the bad guys, like the good guys or the bad guys, they all have these very compelling stories, these very great and deep stories about why they are on the side that they're on, you know especially between the two leaders, being Charles Xavier and Eric Lyncher. Lord Callis, welcome to the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. Just talking about some X-Men and how they're going to be integrated into the MCU. Now, like I was saying, they all have very compelling reasons to why they are on the side that they're on, and I believe that Kevin Feige knows that, and I think that he's going to play into that. Like I said, there are, obviously, as I was saying earlier, there are political allegories to like Martin Luther King Jr. and even even Malcolm X. Now the thing is we know just through all of these things, like Professor Xavier is he's more of an integrationist, where Eric Lyncher is more of an extremist. He don't want to be integrated into the human society. He means to dominate it, and because they are the dominant species, being humans who eventually manifested with these powers at an adolescent age. So I do truly believe that one of the things they're going to do is play on that, and that's why I say I believe that we will get a couple of characters introduced in these films. And so, because the one thing that we see, and that's why this streaming service changes everything, is because in the movies you no longer have to do origin story movies in the MCU anymore. It's just something they don't have to do because they can do all that through these TV shows. And that's one of the things I believe that they're going to do. We get introduced to a couple of characters. They, maybe through whatever means they cross paths and they meet up and they begin to move forward in that way. Russell Wells Benjamin, welcome to the live stream. Happy Labor Day to you as well. I see you take no days off. Love the shirt. Yes, thank you, thank you. No days off. Well, I take the weekends off. But that will probably soon be changing. Where I'll probably start doing some live streaming during the weekends, just doing some different things that I want to do. But yeah, certainly during the week, I want to try to keep these things regular and things like that. Plus, I got a video I've got to shoot later. So yeah, I believe what they'll do is they'll introduce a couple of these X-Men characters into the MCU. Maybe by way situations are just happening to them as they're maybe going through adolescence and their powers start becoming apparent, and through whatever means they eventually cross paths. And that's pretty much it. Maybe they make friends, and that was what I talked about in my video back in February about the X-Men coming into the MCU. Is that say they introduce us to a couple of characters, then they introduce us to a couple of more, and then a couple more. And I say a couple because maybe the movie is going to be more centered around one character, like we got a Captain America, like we got an Iron Man. But even through Iron Man, we got introduced to several different characters through the, like, say, the first Iron Man, we got introduced to Rhodey, War Machine, through the first Iron Man. Through the second Iron Man, we got introduced to Black Widow. They brought her in. The same thing just kind of happens through all the movies. We get introduced to more characters just through the one character. For Captain America, Winter Soldier, we got introduced to not only Falcon, but we also got introduced to Bucky Barnes. But we actually got Bucky Barnes clear back in the first one. The point being is, he was Winter Soldier and the Winter Soldier, obviously. And I believe they would be smart to do the same thing. As Mama Bear says, I'm hoping now that they have Carol Danvers that they'll finally get Rogue right. Ooh, yeah, there's man, that's a different video for a different time. That's a different video. But I think that is actually a very Rogue is definitely one they need to get in there, crossed in there with Carol Danvers for obvious reasons. And I've talked about it before. I have an idea of something they could do in the next Captain Marvel movie to sort of not even necessarily retcon what they did with the first movie, but to bring us more and give us more meat and potatoes for that movie. Because in that movie, they didn't. It's supposed to be an origin story movie, and we didn't really learn anything about her origins, which is something I believe. Hopefully they could. Hopefully they will do that because I do believe that Rogue actually plays a big part in what I would say is something important for the story that I would actually present. But again, with these X-Men characters, I think that they would be smart to start to introduce some of them. And we've already got some of the mutants in the MCU. We've already got Scarlet Witch. We've already had Quicksilver. Now, the way that they could easily go through and not even necessarily retcon those, but it comes to find out that they were mutants the whole time, and that when Dr. List used the Mind Stone and experimented on them, it really, maybe that just unlocked and enhanced their powers. That's really all they have to do. But I believe it would be best for them to introduce these couple of characters into the MCU. And just kind of build upon that the same exact way. And I believe they're going to do that because that's the exact same pattern that they followed with the Avengers. And who knows, maybe instead of our next big event being an Avengers movie, maybe it's an X-Men movie. Maybe it's an X-Men movie where through these TV shows and maybe through another movie or two, we get introduced to the mutants who come into the MCU. And maybe that next big event, instead of being an Avengers movie, is an X-Men movie. Where, like I said, we got introduced to Iron Man. We got introduced to Thor. We got introduced to Captain America. And then, months later, a year later, we get the Avengers movie. And I think that would be very smart to do something exactly with that. I see where you're going with that, and I agree. Yes, yeah, and like I said, I just think that it would be smarter for them to introduce us to these characters before they do it, because it's going to be kind of hard to bring them in. You can't just bring in the X-Men into the MCU and be like, "Hey, here's the mutants. They've been here the whole time. Oh, by the way, Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, they were mutants too. We just didn't know." I think that's something that's obviously going to be a mistake, and the same thing when they go to bring in the Fantastic Four. You know, even one of the guys I watch a lot. Well, you can see me wearing the shirt there. Eric July has even talked about, like, they've got some tough times ahead of them, because you can't just how are you going to just introduce the Reed Richards and the Richards family and all the Fantastic Four into the MCU, and one of the things Eric July has talked about, like, he's going to be mad as hell if we get into the MCU and it turns out, just like we see with Peter Parker looking up to Iron Man, which is something that never happened in the comic books, is Reed Richards going to be one of these stoolies who ends up being, just some Stark flunky who ends up being a real genius or something, and he was looking up to Stark or anything like that? Because that's just, to me, that would be absolute garbage, for one. Okay, because if you ask me if you've seen any of my other videos, to me, I kind of believe that Tony Stark is a sham anyway, always riding on the coattails of Dr. Zola. It's pretty much where he got most of his technology from. Now the thing is, and the big difference is they made a big deal about Tony Stark in the MCU and basically made him, he's that guy. He's the smart guy. He's the genius billionaire philanthropist, right? Where I'm hoping they don't take that route. But in case you haven't been able to tell, we haven't seen any kind of inklings or any kind of just any kind of signs that the Fantastic Four are around or have been around. So Kevin Feige's definitely got his work cut out for him. Now, the thing is it would. I mean, do you go back to your retcon stuff? I mean, just kind of like they did Captain Marvel, where it was, we're in current times, but they went back and they did a movie back, taking place back in the day. I think they can really only do that so much, because at some point you're gonna have to start to ask, just like they did in Avengers Endgame, is where these people been the whole time while everything's going on? Where have they been? Well, and that's where I believe, and we know that these movies are all based loosely on comic books. Okay, that's the source material, is the comic books. But we've already seen in the MCU they don't necessarily take that into account, which I don't really have a problem with, because I don't want to see necessarily the comic books being directly translated into the movies. I just want to see that, just an adaptation of them. It doesn't have to be page for page, panel for panel, word for word, exactly what happened in the comic books. To me, that's absolutely boring. And even people who watch the read the comic books, for somebody who reads the comic books, that would be boring for them. But however, something even Eric July has talked about before, especially this particularly is true for normies. And when I say normies, being a normie isn't a bad thing. Being a normie is just somebody who don't read comic books and is just into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and things like that, just by way of the movies, and don't know absolutely anything about the comic books. They're just not readers. There's nothing wrong with being a normie. I was a normie up until a little over a year ago. I wasn't reading comic books, but through the MCU and just some of those things, I wanted to get out and just started reading some books. And there were some stories I wanted to look into. So there's nothing wrong with being a normie. But that being the case, if you just took these comic books and put them into the made movie versions of them, I can guarantee you those same normies, the people who are upset about Spider-Man not being in the MCU and everything, they're going to be just fine with it. They're going to be happy with the stories that we had in the comic books being translated into films. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a direct adaptation, but it should at least hold somewhat and respect the source material, which is something we can see just through the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that they haven't necessarily done. And like I said, I realize that these movies are a totally different version. These movies are basically, they're just a different version of the comic books, and I realize they aren't going to be the comic books and things like that. That's fine, but that's still no argument to say why they would just take the source material and toss it out the window. So, and I believe that's something that's going on in Marvel Comics right now. I'm sure most of my viewers here probably don't read a whole lot of comic books or anything like that. You're normies. and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I was a normie as well. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't want to read comic books? Hey, I can't blame you. Man, the shit's expensive. Okay, reading comic books is expensive, and it can get expensive really quick, especially if you want to read all these different stories, and look into different things. So the one thing that they're doing right now in the comic books is they're doing a series written by Jonathan Hickman. Now, in case you guys don't know, just and I haven't really read a whole lot of Jonathan Hickman's writing, but from what I've heard is they actually take a lot of the Jonathan Hickman stories that they have actually adapted into the MCU, and that's what they've based a lot of it off of, which brings up the X-Men, exactly what I'm talking about today. Right now, they are doing this. Event in Marvel Comics. Like, it's not necessarily an event. I guess it's just a relaunching, kind of reintroducing the X-Men characters back into the Marvel universe. And they've been there the whole time, but they're changing things up a little bit. And what we see what Jonathan Hickman is doing in these series right now, he's got this series called House of X and Powers of X. And what we're finding out through these through these books is that the mutants are no longer, they're not on Earth anymore. They're not living on Earth. They've got a whole island of their own, and I'm not even sure that they're necessarily on an island. I think they've just got like this place that they've made, and I may have to go, and that's why I'm actually reaching out to somebody so we can get on and talk about these X-Men comic books and stuff like that, and maybe how they're going to be integrated into the MCU. Reached out to a content creator here on YouTube. His name is Franklin. The channel is Wilda Beard Reviews. He's a very knowledgeable person. One of the more knowledgeable people that I personally know and follow here on YouTube. And he knows his X-Men stuff. He's really big into X-Men. I want to get him here on the show to get some of his thoughts about some of these things that I'm talking about. But in these books, we can see they've got their own nation of Krakoa, which Xavier and Magneto are both working together to basically build and sustain. Now, Krakoa is basically this place for mutants only. There is only one way in or out, and only mutants are allowed. If a human wants to go through first, you have to ask for permission to bring them through, and then second, you have to be approved to bring them through. And that's kind of what we see throughout this story is basically Charles Xavier, in the mutants, they have some pills, they have some pharmaceuticals that will help humans with debilitating diseases and things like that. Just things that will help humanity, and all they're asking to basically provide these pharmaceuticals to humans is that they become recognized as a sovereign nation. They just want to be recognized as basically people, part of human Earth, and be able to take part in that without being discriminated against, without being pushed out, without people just basically coming after them. And so they go ahead and they actually make an agreement to where that is. And so basically, in turn, what happens is the mutants are subject to diplomatic immunity. So, and we all know that could open a whole bunch of good and bad things, different possibilities, and we see that play through some of these books, just what we've gotten so far. Now, I think the one important thing here is in these books we see that they have this whole separate nation of Krakoa where the mutants are at, and pretty much no one would really know that they exist if they didn't go to Krakoa, or if the mutants aren't coming through to the different nations and just into the world. So basically, it's just a safe. It's basically a safe space for mutants. Now, I'm wondering, and we know that they, like I said, they've used a lot of Jonathan Hickman stories to integrate into the MCU and do these things with. So it makes me wonder if part of this whole X-Men thing somewhat has to do with that, because it could be easily explained into the MCU. If they had this going on, if Xavier and Magneto are there working together and trying to keep mutants out of like humanity, that could actually play into the MCU. Now, what that would do is, because we seen like in Endgame, people were asking Carol Danvers like, hey, we've had all this stuff going on, where are you at? And she explains, well, there's people other places that don't have the Avengers, so she was basically there helping them out. and which I think is something kind of important when we get into doing the X-Men, because people, if the X-Men have been around the whole time, somebody's eventually going to ask them, like, we've had all this stuff going on, and where the hell have you people been? You guys could help us out. Which obviously we know that people are discriminate against mutants in the world in the first place. So there would be that, but then it would also be the fact that that maybe Xavier and Magneto have been going out on these missions to try to get mutants who are being found throughout society, getting them in and bringing them into Krakoa, and it's something I just kind of wonder if that's what they're going to go with here in these books, because we can see basically what's going on in the House of X and Powers of X is mutants are going to become extinct through way of this thing called Nimrod, which Nimrod was basically an AI that was created by humans to destroy mutants. And kind of through the story, what we've seen so far is Nimrod is out to destroy mutants, but at some point he stops really caring about either ones because it's a computer, and the way like a computer is going to think is to get rid of mutants. We if we're wanting to eradicate mutants, because the Nimrod came through Sentinels, like these. The Sentinels were created by humans, and the Sentinels were created by these Master Molds. The Master Molds are created by Mother Molds, and the Mother Molds are, it goes on. It goes on down the line. Well, eventually what they do is they set up these thresholds. Xavier does, the X-Men and Magneto, they're all working together to they set these thresholds for humanity, of like, when they're watching, they're tracking all this stuff, keeping track of their AI technology and things like that, how they advance existence, because they're basically out to destroy mutants. So if you destroy mutants, what is the ultimate way to destroy mutants is to destroy humans, because humans come by way of humans who are eventually, their mutant powers are triggered, when they're reaching adolescence and things like that. So, eventually Nimrod's going to turn on human beings or not care about human beings, and will probably look to eradicate humans and even mutants. And so that's basically what's going on in the story and what they're trying to fight against. And it's really kind of odd because throughout the story we see that Xavier and Magneto are in fact united together, working together for this dream. And there's a reason why they're working together. Where it seems a little odd getting these two oppositions working together on the same side, and they see eye to eye. They see eye to eye. You don't see. We have not seen them. We haven't even seen them through this new series. I don't even think we've seen them disagree about one thing at all. And part of that reason is one of the characters in this story happens to have knowledge of the future, just basically having lived it. And I don't want to give too much of the story away. And honestly, it probably doesn't matter because, like I said, most of my viewers probably don't read comic books. But basically, this character kind of knows exactly how it's all going to play out, and that's where they eventually come up with the idea that they have to keep an eye on these mother molds and set these parameters for once humans reach this certain stage of AI, they have to shut it down. Otherwise, it's going to create this Nimrod, which is pretty much going to put an end to the existence of mutants and probably humans as well. So eventually what we've got is a story where eventually rightfully humans and mutants would be want to work together to against this Nimrod, because basically what happens is at some point it becomes out of their hands. Like the computer's just doing what it does, humans have nothing to do with it at that point because they've already set the AI in put it in motion, which is exactly, and where did we see that before? And that's why I'm saying could be their way in. Where have we seen that go wrong before? That was Tony Stark creating Ultron in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, in the comic books, it went down differently. Tony Stark had absolutely nothing to do with Ultron being created. It was Hank Pym. But here in the MCU, we see that Tony Stark actually created Ultron to basically protect the Earth. He wanted to keep the Earth safe. It was supposed to be, that blanket around the Earth to protect it from outside threats. And eventually, it became the threat in itself because, he eventually realized, Ultron realized that, like, the problem here is humanity. Humanity is the ones that's destroying the Earth. So to save the Earth, I've got to destroy the humans, or just destroy humanity because they're basically going to be the downfall of it. Because again, that's a computer's logic, and that's what how a computer thinks. A computer doesn't think with emotions or anything like that. It's just thinking about the algorithm, I guess you could say. It's just thinking about that, what it takes to prevent that. So again, I want to see if I can get some guests to come on here on the show with me here maybe later this week to talk about some of these things, and not only just about how we feel they'll be integrated into the MCU, but also just about these comic books and how we think they might play a part in it. But I think that's just something definitely huge because, like I said, we've already seen that in the MCU, where in Age of Ultron, we've seen that these they weren't mutants at the time. These enhanced people were created with the power of the Mind Stone, which is exactly what created Ultron. Okay, and that's basically what's going on in the story. The House of X is the powers of X is the human beings are working, and they created an AI that's going to basically protect them, but is actually probably going to put an end to them. And that's exactly what happened with Ultron. So I'm wondering if that might be the way that the X-Men are going to be introduced into the MCU, because we've already had a couple of the characters, and just maybe by chance, let's say I'm right. Maybe the mutants are out on Krakoa and all of these things, and maybe Wanda and Quicksilver were some of the people, some of the mutants that they didn't actually get a hold of to bring in to Krakoa to help raise and learn their powers and things like that. And I think we see that this WandaVision story is getting ready to happen in the MCU, and then apparently it's going to be tying into Doctor Strange and the madness of the multiverse of madness. So I think that there's a lot that's going to be coming into play there. I think we're definitely going to learn about mutants coming into the MCU by way of WandaVision and even Doctor Strange. But exactly how, I don't know. Like I said, I did that video back in February, thinking that they're probably going to introduce these couple of characters and then introduce us to a couple of more, and then maybe the next big event is an X-Men movie instead of an Avengers movie. And then who knows, maybe after that, maybe they do a couple of those, and then maybe, through along the way we'll probably have another Avengers movie. Maybe at some other point, that's when we get our X-Men versus the Avengers stories. But let's not forget, at the same time, through the Avengers, we may get a Dark Avengers story coming about somewhere out there as well. So that's something that's very interesting. Where maybe there's just going to become that divide, and maybe that's when mutants eventually step in, is because they're like, whoa, like, okay, we've got the Avengers, the Dark Avengers, which they probably won't call them Dark Avengers in the movie. They'd probably be called something else, U.S. Avengers or anything like that. Who knows? Who really knows? I don't know, but maybe that's where the mutants eventually step in, and that's where we get our X-Men versus Avengers, that where finally Magneto and Xavier and all them say, hey man, like, you guys, you Avengers or whatnot, these warring factions of Avengers are fighting each other, and you guys are going to basically destroy humanity or whatnot, destroy the earth. It could be anything like that, just causing so much destruction. And maybe that's where they eventually step in and be like, hey, 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 we can't let this go down. We live here too. This is our world, just, and different things like that. I honestly don't know. And I could be wrong. I mean, I could absolutely be 100% wrong. I have no problems with that. I have been wrong in some of my predictions before. And I guess that's what a lot of us are out there theorizing on some of our channels. We're theorizing, and not all of our theories are going to be correct. But again, that's just for me, how I believe that we're going to get our X-Men into the MCU is uh, by way of just through these streaming services, just what's kind of happening in the comic books and things like that, and even just going basically off of my old predictions. I think that would probably be the best way for them to bring them in, is a couple characters at a time, and eventually they all culminate into the X-Men, and that's where we eventually get them all. But I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Let me know down in the comments below. What do you guys think about my thoughts on the X-Men being introduced into the MCU? Again, like I was saying, throughout the week, I want to see if I can bring some other guests on here to talk about some of these kinds of things. In case you guys don't know, I need some ideas, guys. I need some ideas from you all from you all. Who are some other movie reviewers that you guys think I should bring to this show to help bring it a little more interesting, to bring a little more to it? Because, like I said, here on the morning movie chat, I want to talk about movies. I'm not here to. I don't want to cover like a lot of like the music or even the comic books so much here on the channel, unless they actually pertain to what we're talking about when it comes to the movies. Because like I said, I started this show, this morning movie chats, to talk about movies for about an hour. Basically because, I mean, for one, I'm trying to build my audience and I need something central to build that around. But also, I started it because I know a lot of my viewers, a lot of people that I'm friends with and follow, be it on YouTube, Twitter, or anything like that. Not all of them like the John Campea show. Like me, I love the John Campea show. I get on there and watch every day because like I said, I love movies, I love films, and it's hard to find movies, channels out there who go and have these long conversations about movies and things like that. Just the things that I happen to love, and just talking about all the different nuances of movies and, well, not necessarily TV shows. I'm not big on the TV shows, but that's why I started this, is because there are some people who out there who don't know. Who don't like the John Campea show, and that's what I want to do here. Is I want to build a community just like that, because I believe me, I watched all these kinds of movies. Lord Cal says Stevie J knows his stuff. And you're absolutely right, and he's told me, and I need to get a hold of him. I know here's the biggest challenge for most of us is finding people who can get on the same schedule. But I think Stevie J is actually, he is a good reviewer, and he does know his stuff too. I've watched many of his videos, and he got a good way of getting his opinions across and breaking down some of these movies. So I do need to reach out to Stevie J and bring him on here. And I know, I think he even messaged me one time, talking about we need to do that, and maybe he'll be one of the first ones that I do, so we can get on there and talk about stuff. Because like I said, the John Campea show I love watching the show, but also it's one of the very few shows that I know where people are actually just sitting down, talking about movies, talking about all the different nuances of the movie making processes, and just different things like that. And I think you're absolutely right. Stevie J may be the person that I need to reach out to. But also, I mean, it's got to be somebody that I click with too, that we can get down and sit down and have these great conversations with. Because, at the same time, whether we're both knowledgeable or not, we still got to be able to, I don't know, how would you say, click to make the show interesting for our viewers. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that Stevie J would be a good one. He's a well-spoken individual, and I think he definitely knows his stuff. Man's Mama Bear says, agreed. Individual movies would be smart, like Storm, Colossus, Jean Grey, Rogue, even Remy. And exactly. And I think they all would be. And I think Storm is probably one that's easily introduced, by way of Black Panther, through Wakanda, and things like that. Whether she's actually going to be part of the next Black Panther movie is hard to say, but as we can see, they've got plenty of TV shows on the Disney Plus streaming service that I believe that's really, really going to be where they are really going to be introducing a lot of these characters into the MCU from now on. When they want to give us their backgrounds and their histories. I think we're pretty much done with getting origin story movies in the movies. I think most of those origin stories may come through way of the Disney streaming service and then get integrated into the MCU. And that's something Kevin Feige himself even said, when talking about some of these movies and these TV shows, is we'll be able to bring these characters and introduce them, and before they cross over into the movies, which, and I've talked about that before, is this streaming service through Disney, and them linking it, being directly tied to the MCU, is a game changer. This is a game changer. Like, seriously, like, no other studio, no other properties have really ever done that in this sort of way. But again, Marvel Studios and what Kevin Feige has managed to do is something that nobody's ever really done neither, which was create this whole universe, this whole catalog of movies that just all seems to tie together and all be as one. Nobody's really ever done that. In that sort of way. Now, we've seen other franchises that have come out with movies, and they've got TV shows and things like that, and a lot of them kind of help build upon and things like that, but none of them are crossing over back and forth exactly like what's going to happen here. So I think it's going to be something definitely interesting going into the future, seeing how all that's going to work. Because, like I said, we're going to have, like you said, we got Moon Knight, we got Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, and just these different ones. Hawkeye, the Hawkeye series, how's that going to tie in? It's almost obvious how like Winter Soldier, the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, and WandaVision is going to tie in. I mean, we already know those, but again, it's going to be interesting seeing going forward into the future, seeing exactly how all of these different things are going to be coming into the MCU, especially when Kevin Feige himself has said that's exactly what their plans are. So, and I've heard even people out there talking about just talking about like the Disney Plus streaming service and how it's not going to be worth it, and how it's just a shameless cash grab by Disney and Marvel Studios to get people to have to sign up for this service to know what's going on in the MCU, to be able to keep up with it. And while I do think that's somewhat true, I mean, they plan it that way, but that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But some people are, a lot of the people who are saying that this is a bad thing are some of these same people who are out there saying that they're done with the MCU anyway. And and that's fine too. You don't have to continue watching. I mean, the studio themselves have even said the Endgame was kind of an ending point. It is. It's the end of an era, really. And so if people are off board, hey, I get it. That's perfectly fine. You feel that way about it, more power to you. But me personally, I just want to see this thing build up, and I want to see it grow and build up in the right way. These are things I am passionate about. For them to get me off board of watching these movies, they're gonna have to do a lot more than they've done. I mean, they've really got to crank up the old meter if they want to get me off board, because like I said, I'm just a nerd like that. And again, I care about these things, and I also want to see, in case you guys know me, like, I don't want to sit here and talk about on my show things that I don't know. So you won't see me talking about things that I don't know. If I don't, I'll tell you about as much as I do know about them, and I'll claim and I'll let you know my ignorance when it comes to those sort of things. Like when we're talking about TV shows and stuff like that. Like if we want to get into like Netflix, Marvel right now, I couldn't tell you a whole lot about them other than, I mean, I've watched most of them. I'm just not really into them, so I'm not very knowledgeable about them. But again, so these are things that I will be watching when Disney Plus streaming service comes out. Yeah, I'm gonna subscribe to it. They've got Disney has a whole lot of properties that they can put on there. Things that I'm willing to watch. I wish we could watch some of those old TV shows they used to do, some of the old Mickey Mouse clubs and stuff like that, just to laugh at. But I also, they've got a catalog of old movies that they did, that I remember watching when I was growing up. They've got TV shows and all of these different kinds of things that they'll have on the platform. Because I've heard people talking about they won't have anything to put on there. They have so little to offer, and that's why it's gonna be so cheap. And I mean, anybody who's saying this, let me just tell you, anybody who's saying that they won't have a lot to offer has absolutely no clue what they're talking about. I'm not saying you should unfollow them or not listen to them or anything like that. I'm saying that they have absolutely no clue what they're talking about, and they obviously don't know the properties that Disney has to put onto their streaming service. They've got TV shows, they've got movies, they've got classic movies, all of these different things that they can put on that streaming service that they're going to have to offer. So now, if you're talking about new content, they're going to have plenty of new content as well. They'll have these MCU shows coming up. They've obviously got the Star Wars shows coming up with the Mandalorian, and they're going to have a whole host of other things that they currently have right now that they put out on like the Disney Channel and things like that. So they will have plenty of things to offer. Lord Cal says, if you have the capability to launch a platform and retain 100% of royalties, why would I give that to Hulu, Netflix, Prime, etc.? Exactly. It's exactly. Why would they want to do that? Now the thing with Hulu is I believe Disney owns Hulu. They're major shareholders or something like that of Hulu. So I can imagine that they'll be pushing some things through there, but a majority of it they're going to want to keep on the Disney Plus streaming services. And if I'm not wrong, I believe they're actually tying in some of the like they're putting some of the stuff directly on Hulu, and I think they're doing a package with like I think it's Hulu, Disney Plus, and like ESPN, where they're all tying into one package. So I mean, they're gonna do all they can to make the money on it and to integrate everything, and I think rightfully they should. I mean, why would you get these properties and not want to build upon them and make money? I mean, that would be dumb business. You know what I mean? That would be bad business. Aggressively relaxing says Disney Plus not worth it. Just rewatching Rescuers Down Under over and over again would make it worth it, right? Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's what I'm saying. I've heard people out there talking about this stuff. Disney Plus isn't gonna be worth it, but like, and again, like to most of these people, I gotta say, like these people have no clue what they're talking about. If you got somebody out there who's saying Disney Plus isn't gonna be worth it, they won't have nothing to put onto their channel. I can tell you that this person is probably full of crap and has absolutely no clue what they're talking about. No clue. No clue. Because, like I said, Disney's a monster. Disney's been a monster forever. They've had this huge catalog of movies, TV shows, and films for a long time. For a long time. Um, and like I said, we're not even talking just movies. We're talking TV shows and things as well that they've had throughout the past. These other properties that they have a hold of. So I mean, for anybody to say that this Disney Plus streaming service is not going to be worth it, I've just anybody that's got that to say, I mean, I just have to. I just have to say they have no clue what they're talking about, and maybe they're just one of these people who just wants to hate on Disney just because there's some big corporate conglomerate. There's just people out there like that, and like I said, to each their own. But to each their own doesn't mean that you have to be dumb about anything. Because to say that they don't have much, that they won't have much to offer, is a completely dumb statement to make. It is actually 100% completely inaccurate, because they have they have a lot to offer. But whether you like it or not is the ultimate thing, and that's where I think we're getting a lot of these people who are saying they don't have much to offer are people who don't like Disney or what they have to offer. They're not into, like, some of these older TV shows, any of these older movies. They're already turned away by the Star Wars, by the MCUs, and just the things that have been going on there. I can guarantee you that's the people who are saying most of this, that Disney Plus won't have any value, because they absolutely will. I think even launching off, they've got a lot to offer, because there's a lot of things, these Disney properties out there that you can't go find anywhere else. Like they're really hard to find. Chances are you probably have to own them on DVD or VHS in order to watch them. And yeah, I said VHS because there's probably plenty of things that they don't have on DVD. Aggressively Relaxing says ESPN and Disney together. Now I can get my cage fighting and Bambi fix from the same package, right? Yes, yes. And oh man, I haven't watched Bambi in a while. Haven't watched that in a while. That's a good one. I know we own that one too. We own that one. But anyway, I think that's all I've got for this edition of the morning movie chat here on Monday. Like I said, hopefully I've reached out to a few people. Hopefully I can get some people here on the show later this week to talk more about this exact subject with the X-Men coming into the MCU, and how I think that might be happening with the X-Men and integrating them into the MCU. Because I think that this Immortal Biggie Shack, welcome to the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. I believe this Jonathan Hickman series and what's going on with it is going to be kind of utilized as their segue to bring in the mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As I said, they are they're kind of going back and revising some of the history through what's been happening in these events. What if Disney buys DC or Image? DC, it might be too late, because Warner Brothers has. I'm not sure if Warner Brothers owns DC, but Warner Brothers has basically been the distributor of everything DC since for a long time. For a long time, Warner Brothers has done that. I know back in the day when I was a kid growing up, when Batman '89 came out, the old, the Michael Keaton Batman, they had that. I used to get these little catalogs in the mail from Warner Brothers, where you could get in there and you could order things from like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Batman, and just any of the different movie posters, and just all like the little toys and stuff like that. You could order all those directly through this Warner Brothers catalog that I used to get. I wish I still had some of those, because I think we ordered a couple of things from there when I was a kid, just through that service that they had. But Image, honestly, I couldn't see Disney selling out or Image selling out to Disney, and mostly because because if I'm not wrong, I believe Todd McFarlane is one of like the co-founders, one of the big guys over there at Image Comics, and you know damn well as I do, Todd McFarlane is gonna have absolutely nothing to do with that. I don't think he's ever going to be at a point where he says, "Oh yeah, I'm willing to give my some interest to Disney and sell out to them." I absolutely think that would never happen with Image in the first place. Um, but that would be pretty crazy. But also, I don't think it would happen either, because that would, in essentially in itself, create a monopoly. Probably, definitely, for sure, create more of a monopoly, where I think it was hard enough for Disney to gain control of these Fox properties to begin with. The government obviously got involved with some of those big mergers and stuff like that, because you cannot have a monopoly. And I think that's kind of what would be going on if Disney were to really acquire any more of these competing IPs. Um, yeah, Immortal Big Shack says, "I don't put anything past Disney. I think they like to go all out. Just something I've been thinking about. Disney could probably buy Warner Brothers, in my opinion. They can't, though. They can't. It's too late for that. They've already got they're already teetering on being a monopoly in the first place, and the government just won't allow it to happen. It just won't happen. I could sit here and I'll give you a 99.9% guarantee that Disney can and will never be able to do that. Um, but I mean, and honestly, I wouldn't want it to happen. And I've even talked about this in the past. Even if they did get all these things, they still, a lot of people have been talking. They're like, oh, Disney's going to destroy all these things. They own all these things. Like, people talking like they've already got a monopoly. And the thing is they've only got a lot of IPs. They own the Star Wars franchise. They own Marvel, and then just kind of all the things that they've done through there. I mean, Indiana Jones and just some of those types of things. They've got the monopoly on some of the IPs, but they'll never have a monopoly over the movie industry, because there are movies that Disney will never make. Like some of the rated R movies, some of the more hardcore things, you're never going to make. Disney's also not into making small time pictures. They're not into making small independent pictures, independent films, or anything like that. Like, really, they're really not even to making anything of the sort that's even close to an independent film. Basically, if it don't make money, they don't want to have anything to do with it. So I think that's where a lot of the other studios are still always going to be dominant and prevalent is in the fact that they will offer those kinds of things. Like a movie like Upgrade, Disney would never put out a movie like an Upgrade. They wouldn't back it, they wouldn't fund it, or anything like that. So I just think that's something it's a pretty kind of big there. um Young Ripper 59, welcome to the live stream. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I got some water right here. Stay hydrated, right? Stay hydrated. Yeah. And I was actually listening to your For Canon's Sake when I was getting ready to go out for a bike ride this morning. Got out and did a nice little bike ride, and that's something that you guys should do. Make sure every day you guys get out and do something a little bit for your health, man. Like, get out and do a workout in the morning. A lot of times, if you see me here doing my live stream, chances are I've probably already done my workout, because that's kind of one of my prerequisites before coming on to do a live stream is I have to get my workout in. Whether that's a nice short ride or a workout, go out to the garage and lift some weights. I've got to get my workout in. That's kind of one of my prerequisites to getting here and doing these live streams. So chances are, if you ever see me on a live stream, I've done my workout. And chances are, if you don't see me doing one, I haven't done it, and that's why I'm not doing one. Like, I think it was last week on, wow, there's one of the days I didn't get one of the streams done. Um, and thank you. Yeah, I do like that shirt. It's one of my favorites. I actually even got the tank top version of the exact same thing. Aggressively relaxing says, you had talked about the anti Star Wars folks. I have loved watching live reactions of them watching the new Star Wars trailer. They are all fighting back tears of joy, explaining how bad it was. Yeah, and like, for me, I'm just, I realized after all this stuff has kind of come out, I'm not as big a Star Wars fan as some of these other people are. One of my favorite creators actually here, Lord Callus. He's somebody who definitely knows his stuff. He's definitely into the EU stuff. He actually just dropped a video this morning. Very knowledgeable when it comes to Star Wars and the EU. You should definitely go check out his channel, Lord Callus. great videos. And yeah, and of course, there's always going to be people upset at some of these trailers and things like that. And again, there's just some people out there who are going to be upset no matter what. They're just mad to be mad. And that's something you won't find. It's something you won't find here on my channel, is me being mad just to be mad. Immortal Biggie Shack says, I appreciate the info, just the idea. I don't want it to happen either, but it would be epic to see Superman and Spider-Man in a movie. Well, and that's the thing, is they could still always do crossovers, but the way, like, I think the only way that would ever happen is Kevin Feige would want to say, okay, DC, if you ever want to do a crossover with us, you've got to get your stuff together. Like, you guys are like a hot mess, and I can't have anything to do with that. But I think they're actually out riding the ship right now, over there at DC and Warner Brothers, hopefully to bring us some better quality films here in the future. Um, little Shaq keeps me on my toes, right? Yes. Um, but again, like I said, guys, pay attention here throughout the week. I've got some people that I've reached out to that I want to bring here onto the show, to talk about the X-Men more, about this comic series, and how I think some of this new Hickman comic series is probably somewhat how they're going to play, going into the MCU here into the future. And also keep an eye out for just some other videos. I want to bring in some other content creators as well, to talk more about comic books. In case you guys don't know, like, I just got back into reading comic books a little over a year ago, and so I'm not the most knowledgeable person on it. But I want to bring in other people who I found out there who have different various opinions and who know more about comic books than I do, so I can sit down and do some more just chats about comic books. Like, one of the things I'm not really big on is like Comicsgate. I don't know a whole lot about it, and I've got a few people that I want to bring on and kind of talk about that, maybe enlighten me and then enlighten you guys, because I know a lot of my viewers aren't necessarily comic book readers, and I know some of you are, and maybe it would be great, because some people don't want to go to some of these other people's channels to check them out, because some people are a little bit extreme for others, you know what I mean? And I get that. But if you guys know me, I'm one of those people. I like to hear everybody's views and everybody's thoughts and opinions, so I can, it helps me gather my thoughts and opinions, and it also helps me grow as a content creator and just as a person in general. I like to take inspiration from all of the outside world, and let that kind of feed and play into exactly what I talk about. Like you guys, other channels, other people out there are my inspiration for doing what I do. And again, thank you all so much for tuning into the Second Street Marvel today. That's all I have for this video. Be sure you, like I said, make sure you check out the links down in the comments below. You can go, or down in the description, you can go and become a monthly Patreon supporter of mine, or there is even a link down there where you can send direct donations through Streamlabs to help support the channel. Again, I will be having my comic previews coming out a little bit later today, and then obviously my comic book pull list be coming out on Wednesday, and then as always, every single Friday I do the Trailer Park Live at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where I go over some of the comic books I pulled for the week, and then I get in and talk and interact with you all in the comments, and it's always a good time. Every single time you guys show up to any one of these live streams, you guys are pretty much what makes these live streams. You guys help give me energy. You guys help give me questions and even more things to talk about. But in case you haven't been here before, I'm quite the nerd and can go on and on and on for a very long time talking and flapping my gums to this computer screen all by myself. But that's all I have for this video today, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning into the Second Street Marvel today. If you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed. Click the little bell so you get notifications anytime I have uploaded new content. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And while you're at it, make sure that you share it with a friend and invite them to come hang out with us here on the Second Street Marvel. You all have a very good day. Happy reading, and we'll see you in the next video. Later. Thank you all so much for tuning in. You all have a very good day. Make sure you share this video with a friend and let them know that I'm here. And if you guys have any other suggestions on topics or things I can talk about on these shows, please feel free to reach out to me in the about section here on my channel. You can get a hold of me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any of those other social media outlets. You can find all of those in the about section here on my channel. Again, thank you all so much tuning in to the Second Street Marvel today. You all have a very good day. Have a great week. And yeah, you guys all have a very good Labor Day as well. We'll see you in the next live stream.